Howdy y'all, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be looking at one of the marvels of the ancient world. That is Angkor Wat in modern-day Cambodia. In all likelihood, you have seen this immense ancient structure before if you've dabbled into old world research. However, in today's video, I would like to share with you some unique photographs that would be taken in the mid to late 1800s and the early 1900s. These will be the earliest photographs of Angkor Wat, which I could locate from museums and private collections around the world. We will also briefly look at some depictions and briefly discuss the narrative regarding the ancient land of Siam. In modern times, Western history will say that Siam, for which we have the word Siamese, encompassed what is now modern-day Thailand and parts of many surrounding areas. When we take a deep dive into this history, we find that Siam was in fact a vast kingdom full of ancient temples of absolutely remarkable proportions, including Angkor Wat. While I wanted to focus mainly on the photographs, I believe a proper place to begin is with what some would term as antiquitech, or ancient equipment of sorts, which appears to have had an advanced purpose not described in modern-day history books. In this case, we will be looking at the royal attire, specifically the crowns of the royalty of the Siam Empire. At its peak, the Siam Empire encompassed all of modern-day Thailand, nearly all of Laos, large portions of Vietnam, most of Cambodia, and portions of Malaysia as well. This vast empire also yielded us with some very mysterious, if not downright breathtaking temples, known as Wats, which many still remain in much of their original glory today. The most famous and the focus of our video will be Angkor Wat. But before discussing that and focusing on these oldest known photographs of Angkor Wat, let's first tie this history back to the Kingdom of Siam. First of note, Siam, or Thailand as it's known today, was the only Asian nation during the Western imperialism of Asia to have never fallen under the colonization of any foreign power. However, Siam was often subjugated to unequal treaties, and this is why we see modern-day Thailand being much smaller than the original Kingdom of Siam. Prior to World War I, Siam was turned into an absolute monarchy, and the name was changed to Thailand. During World War I, Thailand aligned with the Allies in hopes of amending the unequal treaties of the past. After World War I, when conditions did not improve, a bloodless revolution occurred in Thailand, which saw Thailand align with the Axis powers during World War II. What I want to focus on are these crowns, or the royal caps of Siam, taken before the country converted to an absolute monarchy. These crowns, which are depicted throughout time, can be found on the earliest artistic depiction of the kings of Siam, as well as the earliest carvings of the Wats. These crowns resemble the ancient towers of Angkor Wat. However, as I've discussed in a previous video, these crowns and the tower at Angkor Wat also is a representation of the Buddhist or Hindu Mount Meru. As we look through these crowns and the royal attire of Siam, we see very advanced, and when compared to other crowns we see worldwide, somewhat out of the ordinary designs, which seem to indicate a possible dual purpose. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments regarding these crowns, this head attire, and the history of Siam down below. Diving into the earliest photographs of Angkor Wat, these images, like most in my Old World series, really speak for themselves. I will briefly break down what the current narrative says about Angkor Wat. However, I believe you can make your own assessments here, and I will provide links below for you to further your reading. A World Heritage Site, a national symbol, and one of the most sacred sites to Cambodian Buddhism and Hinduism, Angkor Wat, literally translated as City of Temples, was founded in early 12th century by the Angkorian or Khmer Empire. Angkor Wat is the largest religious complex in the world by land area. It is 3 times larger than Vatican City. Angkor Wat has a central spire that stands over 213 feet tall, and the entire complex is surrounded by a wall that stretches over 2.25 miles. And this wall itself is surrounded by a perfectly shaped moat, which measures more than 3 miles long. The moat, as well as the entire complex in general, is built on an intricate geometrical pattern or design, including the moat itself, which has perfect 90-degree angles. As we view Angkor Wat from the sky, we see that this nearly indescribable construction begins to take shape. We are told that Angkor Wat is a massive temple, which is known as the largest in the world as far as land area. And when we look at all the land that was actually carved or designed to make this temple possible, it really is a lot for us to ponder. The Angkorian Empire existed from roughly the 9th century to roughly the 15th century, beginning with Jayavarman II, who declared himself God King in 802, and ending in roughly 1431 with the siege of Angkor. During its peak, the Angkorian Empire was larger than the Byzantine Empire, which existed at roughly the same time period. The Angkorian Empire is stated as being the largest pre-industrial urban center to ever exist in the world. Remarkably, as we look through these photographs, I am taken back by the dichotomy that we are seeing in the 1800s. We see the streets, much like the old American streets in Old World photographs, lacking any real structure or refinement, yet the buildings, most notably these temples or the Wats, seem to exceed any construction ability that we would have had at the time period. The ancient structures have also stood up to the test of time remarkably well, considering that Angkor had been sieged and had been through many shifts in belief and policy. The ancient royal headwear of Siam only seems to mimic the royal geometric patterns that we're seeing in the temples like Angkor Wat. As we compare and contrast these photographs, I believe we see more than meets the eye, as many of you might agree. I believe there is a reason that Thailand, or Siam, never fell to imperialism, I also believe there is always more to discover when we research ancient kingdoms which were seemingly purposefully shrunk throughout time and throughout the narrative. In the case of Siam, we have one of the most important ancient locations for the religions of Hinduism and Buddhism, and more specifically, when we look at Angkor Wat, we can see this location becoming infamous worldwide nearly from the moment that word was spread of it. The history apparently being so old that we barely have a full ability to comprehend how this was constructed. One thing that really stood out to me when we look into these oldest photographs of Angkor Wat is that Angkor Wat itself was such a vast temple and is such a vast temple, even to this day, being the largest temple complex, at least by land area, in the entire world. And we can compare it to modern day temples, and we can just imagine that when Angkor Wat was first introduced to the Western world, it became something of a myth, something of a legend, and people began to flock to Siam just to get a view of Angkor Wat. It brought a whole new sort of tradition to the area, and I think that's really interesting because following this discovery or this sharing of Angkor Wat with the rest of the world, we have many other temples along these lines being discovered, ones that are very similar, that include these sort of designs that are mimicking Mount Meru, mimicking this mountain, this mythical, legendary mountain that is important to both Buddhism and Hinduism. So I found that to be really interesting. But I'll wrap up the video there. I just want to know, what do you think about Angkor Wat? Do you see these ancient photographs showing any differences from the modern day photographs? What about the Kingdom of Siam and the Siamese royal crowns? Do you see a tie here with these crowns and Mount Meru, which itself is also quite an amazing myth for you to research into, so I will leave a link to that down below as well. Could these crowns have had a dual purpose? Do you see any sort of ties to this crown and the discussion of Antiquitech that we see on my channel and many other old world history channels? We see these similar designs on later crowns and head attire when we look at religious orders like the Holy Roman Empire, and we must ask ourselves, was the Holy Roman Empire heavily influenced by the Kingdom of Siam? Could Angkor Wat really fit into the timeline with the narrative that we are given today? I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments down below. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can reach me right here. Thank you so much for joining me on this video today. I look forward to reading through your discussion and hopefully joining in myself within the comments down below. And before I chime out on this video, there is one more thing I want to make mention of. We do have a handful of photographs of Angkor Wat that I still want to share with you, but I do want to make mention of a video that I saw on the Wooden Nickels channel, where he goes in depth into a discussion about the restoration process of an old Egyptian temple. Now, within this restoration process, one of the things they do that I found absolutely fascinating is they actually go into this old Egyptian construction and they carve into it. And they carve into it to make it look like it was stonework. They carve into one harmonious construction to add lines to it to make it look like it was blockwork, or to make it look like it was one piece stacked on top of another. And I found that to be very interesting, especially when we compare it to the construction at Angkor Wat. If you haven't checked out Wooden Nickel's channel or that video, I would definitely recommend doing that after you finish this one. I also have a bunch of other videos myself that I think you would really enjoy. But when we look into the restoration process, we have to wonder if any restoration was done to Angkor Wat or any changes made before this beautiful construction, this old world temple of immense stature, was brought to the public. So I'm just going to leave the video there. Love to hear your thoughts and comments down below, and we will talk very soon on the next one.